Welcome to Awakening into Life, where we host an ongoing series of conversations regarding the nature of non-duality, self-realization, and the embodiment of awakening, all offered freely from the heart of Bradley. In today's session, we will be continuing our Campaign of Consciousness series, specifically talking about the practice of mindfulness and meditation. Hello, everyone. This is Bradley from awakeningintolife.com. And I want to welcome you all to the third session in our Campaign of Consciousness series. And I just want to offer a couple of reminders. First of all, this session is open, it's free, it's something that anybody can take part in. It's being hosted on Zoom and also broadcast on Facebook Live. The session is recorded, and if you would prefer to maintain your privacy, you are welcome to keep your video off, welcome to keep your microphone on mute. You don't necessarily have to say anything at any point or share anything at any point. But really, we try to make these sessions available to folks, even if they're not able to be here. And for some people who do attend these sessions, they often find it helpful to be able to go back and listen again at some other point. So it's always wonderful to be able to make these sessions and these materials available to anyone who might be interested in them. So hopefully things are going all right there on Facebook Live. Usually it looks to me like it's a frozen image, but hopefully not. Hopefully it's working fine. So as I said, this evening's discussion is on practicing mindfulness and meditation, or learning how to practice mindfulness and meditation. Let me see here. I've got a chat notice. All right. Hello, everyone. Wonderful, wonderful. Yes, hello, hello. I am paying attention to the chat notifications both on Zoom and Facebook Live. So if at some point you have a question, you're more than welcome to chat, to share it in the comments area, or to share it in the group chat. Or if you're here with me online on Zoom, you have the opportunity to be interactive. You can open up your mic and we can talk a little bit if there are questions along the way. So, practicing mindfulness and meditation. I'm going to talk about some of the meditation practices we won't be covering, and I'm going to explain why. But then I'm going to go into mindfulness itself as a practice, and what constitutes mindfulness, what it's about, and some of the various ways that we can engage in the process of being mindful. I'm also going to provide some basic instruction in something called insight meditation, which is essentially a breath-based meditation, but it also helps us with labeling and allowing and a few other things that are important to the meditative process. And I'm also going to talk about the heart breath, which is a very specific technique that just sort of emerged out of my own experience. It facilitated my own process or experience of awakening, and it's where I live, it's where I abide, and it's sort of a combination of mindfulness grounded in the heart with some of the Vipassana techniques. So there's a reason why I'm sort of building up in the way that I am with these approaches. Then I'm also going to talk about some of the contemplative approaches to meditation, the various ways that we can use the mind itself for inner investigation. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about self-inquiry, a very specific technique or method that's used to inquire into the nature of the self. And it really is sort of a meditative technique in its own right. And then I'm going to break out of these conversations about meditative techniques, and I'm going to draw us into a deeper conversation about what meditation really is and who you really are and how the two come together. If we have some time towards the end, I also want to talk, I might include some conversation about metta meditation, which is a heart meditation, sort of help with loving kindness and compassion. But towards the end here, if I have an opportunity, I'm going to talk a little bit about psychedelics and psychedelics within the context of meditation and the potential impact. So here I just listed a few of the different mindfulness and meditation techniques that I am going to cover and that I am going to go through. And there are many, many different types of meditation practice that we can engage in, and I'm sure we're all familiar with that basic fact. There are many different options available to us. Some of us may already have certain meditation practices that we engage in, and that's all very wonderful. The meditations that I'm focused on this evening, I share them for a very specific reason. In the very first session of this series, we were talking about tilting ourselves in the direction of awakening. And we were talking about awakening as a profound shift in conscious perception, right? We also talked about how we move beyond words. We become aware of ourselves as awareness, as this ineffable aware presence, as this seamless wholeness, as this empty fullness. Really, it really is something that's beyond words and has to be experienced directly. Has to be experienced directly in our own immediacy. It's been very important to me to state over and over again that each and every one of us must encounter these kinds of teachings and this kind of inner work on our own terms, and not just sort of go along with it. You know, it's about taking the bits and pieces that are handed to you and assembling your own puzzle. But these practices that I'm talking about tonight, they're geared in that direction. They are geared in the direction of recognizing who and what you are, stabilizing in your understanding of that, and living it on a daily basis, bringing that sort of embodied experience of life into life itself. So I'm not going to be talking about any kind of meditative practice that requires any sort of visualization technique, right? We're not looking at imagery or symbolism. Those things aren't really relevant to this kind of work. I'm also not going to be spending time on meditative practices that are about changing our thoughts from one kind of thought to another kind of thought. We will talk a little bit about some of that in the contemplative area, but really it isn't the emphasis or the focus of these meditations. The emphasis or the focus is to see beyond the words, to see beyond language, to see beyond belief, right? To really and truly recognize and embody our own direct experience of ourselves as this aware presence, as the intelligent aliveness of life, however the language works best for you. So let's start with mindfulness. And I highly recommend that everyone take a class on mindfulness, whether it's, you know, a short retreat-oriented mindfulness training series that you could take at like a local Zen center or Buddhist retreat center or Buddhist temple, or even in many other disciplines. Mindfulness has become very prominent in our culture now. If you have an interest in mindfulness and you are interested in taking a course, there's a wonderful course through Sounds True. It's an 8-week course in mindfulness-based stress reduction. So it has a very psychological, I'm always trying to bring the merging of psychological understanding of psychological theories and models to this work, so that we can see that, you know, when we talk about non-duality, self-realization, and the embodiment of awakening, we're not really talking about something that's sort of mystical or spiritual, not really. We're talking about something that's very practical and very pragmatic. It's spiritual, yes, and it does have a mystical quality to it, yes. But this isn't really about transcending the world or transcending experience. This is about embodying our experience of life. So mindfulness is a really wonderful tool set that can be used. And it originates out of the Buddhist tradition. It certainly doesn't belong to the Buddhist tradition at this point. Anyone, anywhere, from any tradition can learn mindfulness practices. I've heard many, for instance, Catholic or Christian priests and other clergy who have said that when they went and spent time learning about mindfulness, it actually brought them closer to God, or brought them closer in their relationship with Jesus. And so, you know, I've heard a quote that says, you know, by going through this mindfulness practice, you know, by practicing Buddhist mindfulness, I became a better Christian. And as we can see, again, there's a psychological factor here at play. It isn't about Buddhism. This is about wisdom. This is about embodied wisdom. So mindfulness as a practice originates out of Buddhist tradition. And probably one of the most clear-cut texts that we have on this is the Satipatthana Sutta, the foundations of mindfulness. The Buddha described essentially 4 foundations of mindfulness. And mindfulness in this context is really awareness, right? It's really being very aware and very present in our experience as it is, using the moment as a way to connect to the moment. That's really what mindfulness is about. And it takes on different meaning, and it shows up in different ways depending on where we are on our path. But as sort of a beginning definition, this is about creating greater awareness, becoming more aware. And the way the Buddha described it is he talked about these 4 foundations. And the first one of these 4 foundations is really contemplating the body as the body. And there are many ways that we can contemplate the body as the body. For instance, we can contemplate the breath. So as one example of a way that we can practice mindfulness is we can become mindful of the breath. And so tonight, I want to make our discussion this evening a little more interactive, a little more engaged. And I want to invite you to try some of these things just in short bits, because, you know, we only have about an hour and a half to go through them. But if we spend a couple of minutes here and 5 minutes there, actually trying some of these on, actually trying them out for ourselves, we might be able to get a sense of their usefulness or their quality as a part of this inner investigation. So being mindful of the breath, just as you're sitting here right now, not doing anything in particular, not closing your eyes and entering into some deep meditative state, but just right here, right now, just become aware of your breath. Doesn't matter if you're breathing through your nose, doesn't matter if you're breathing through your mouth. Just becoming aware of the fact, oh, there's breathing occurring. And noticing that breathing. Notice the quality of the breath. Are your breaths long breaths or short breaths? Are they deep breaths or are they shallow breaths? When you breathe in, is there a sense of heat or a sense of cold? When you breathe out, is there a sense of heat? Is there a sense of cold? Is there a tickle in your throat or a tickle in your nose? Just really becoming very present with everything that's engaged in our breathing. And of course, you can do this anywhere. This isn't meditation. This isn't something we're doing on a cushion. It's something we're doing here right now together. It's something you can do when you're standing in line at the supermarket, or you can do it when you're driving your car. This is just paying attention to the breath. You can multitask and still be aware of and present with the movements of the breath. You can feel it in your lungs. You can feel it in your belly. You can feel it in your whole body. So that's one example of contemplating the body as body using the breath. Another example could be walking. I used to spend hours every night as I was going through my initial process of awakening, about 3 to 6 to 9 months afterwards. I would spend a lot of time walking down the streets in downtown Seattle, very, very slowly, with a very, very deep focus on mindful walking. And so when I'm talking about mindful walking, it looks like everybody has their camera off, so you can do this or not do this, and you don't have to turn your camera on, but you can get up, right? And as you get up, you can start to notice the feeling of your feet, whether they're in shoes or on the ground or in socks, it doesn't matter, just noticing the feeling, the quality of the shift of weight as the weight of your body is drawn down into your feet and connects you with your experience of the earth. The flatness of the substrate that's beneath your feet. And if you take one step forward, right, just one step forward, can you notice, can you bring your attention to the initial movement of the hip or to the knee? When there's a movement, when the movement of the first step, the leg has its own sort of a momentum. Can you notice each and every aspect of that movement? The hip, the knee, the ankle, the muscles as they contract to raise the leg up, the muscles as they relax in order to drop the leg back down. And when you drop the leg back down, noticing the impact again on the earth, noticing the impact again of your foot, and just being really deeply present with the sensation of the body, really deeply present with the sensation of our experience. This is about being in the body. This is very grounded in our physical experience of the body. Take 2 steps, take 3 steps, take 4 steps. Notice the moving back and forth, the shifting of weight, the shifting of balance. Notice each and every aspect or quality or moment of the entire process. Another thing that we can do to practice mindfulness is eating. We can eat mindfully. We can be really, really present with the thing that we're eating, whatever it is, a salad or a cheeseburger, it doesn't really matter. But you can be fully present with the movement of your arm as you have your fork or your spoon in hand, or you're just reaching to grab the item, right? You can notice the movement of your arms and the sensations of your physical body as you move the food towards your mouth. As you open your mouth, you can feel the jaw, the way that it relaxes to open. When you put the food in your mouth, you can notice the texture, the taste, the quality of the food as it enters into your body. As you begin to chew, you can feel the movement. You're just paying very close and very careful attention to each and every aspect of the eating experience. And if you want to try something very basic and very simple, you could do something like just using a grape, just one single grape. Have one single grape, go through the whole experience, the whole sensate experience of the grape, and then be really present with that experience of the grape as it dissipates, right? Spending a few moments to be thankful for that experience, to allow it to teach you, to allow it to show you, to allow it to reveal, and then being able to go in and then perhaps have another one or something else. So you can use this as a practice. To practice mindfulness, we could also look at physical tasks, right? So brushing your teeth, something you do every day. You can become very mindful of the entire process from the moment that you start walking towards the bathroom to brush your teeth. Look, here I am. I'm doing meditative walking towards the bathroom. Wonderful. Now I'm in the bathroom. Now I'm reaching for the toothpaste. I'm opening the toothpaste up. I'm putting the toothpaste on my brush. I'm bringing the brush to my teeth. I'm moving the brush around in my mouth. Being really, really present with just that experience. Or when you go out to your car and you start your car. Oh, I'm opening the door. Oh, okay, I'm being really present with opening the door. Oh, okay, I'm putting the keys in the ignition. I'm being really present with just. So you can pick a couple of tasks, 2 or 3 tasks in your daily life, things that you do all the time. And you can just start there. Start by bringing a sense of mindfulness, a sense of awareness, a sense of presence to those discrete tasks. And you can always go back to the breath. You can always go to walking. You can use pretty much any experience for mindfulness. And these are all qualities, mindfulness of the body, just being really mindfulness of the body. As the Buddha said, when a monk is standing, he knows that he's standing. When he's sitting, he knows that he's sitting. When he's laying down, he knows that he's laying down. So being really aware and really present with the body. The next foundation is really contemplating feelings as feelings. Yeah. So when a feeling arises within the space of our awareness, this aware, mindful presence, right, that we're cultivating, as a feeling arises, right, I'm feeling this way or I'm feeling that way, noticing whether the feeling sensation or the feeling itself is a pleasant feeling or an unpleasant feeling. Or perhaps it's neither pleasant nor unpleasant, but neutral. To just notice, there's a feeling here, and you can give words to the feeling. You can label it in a way that helps you connect with it. And then you can inquire into the feeling. What is it about this feeling? Is this feeling pleasant to me? Is it something that I'm drawn towards? Do I like this particular feeling or this particular sensation? Is it making me happy? Is it instilling joy? Is it right? And the same thing for unpleasant feelings, right? What is it about this feeling that's here? Oh, this feeling is very unpleasant. I don't like it. I don't want it. I want to fix it. I want to get out of it. I want to escape it. I want to avoid it, right? To be really present with that. And the neutral feelings that are coming up, things, it's just like, oh yeah, that's a thought, but I don't have any it doesn't have any real hold over me. That thought isn't dragging me off in one direction or another. Okay? Now this contemplating feelings as feelings helps us to start to recognize that all the feelings, whether they're pleasant feelings or unpleasant feelings, they are movements within our conscious being. And what we are, who we are, is aware of those feelings, pleasant or unpleasant or neutral, aware of the feelings. So there's a feeling state that we are aware of. Are you the feeling state, or are you that which is aware of the feeling state? All the feeling states seem to come and go, do they not? And so, to whom do they appear? What's this space called the I within which they appear and from which they disappear. And they're all made of the same stuff. To really notice that all of our pleasant and unpleasant feelings and sensations and experiences, they are all of the same stuff. They're all of the phenomenal realm. We'll get into that a little bit more here. But to notice that they all have the same stuff. This is why the third patriarch of Zen in the Sin Ming starts by saying, the great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. You know? Are you trying to make your whole life about pleasant sensations and pleasant feelings and pleasant experiences? Because that's not how life works, and so we're bound to fail. It's not until we can establish ourselves within what's called equanimity, or an equilibrium, or a balance, or a centered state, you know, where we can allow for all of it without trying to grasp or cling, and without trying to reject or push away. We can just be present with all of it. So feelings is feelings. The next one is to contemplate the mind as mind. To recognize the nature of mental formations. And this is where we get into that language conversation. How it is that most of us are living our lives through the lens of language, and as a result of that lens of language, we're experiencing life a certain way. The narrative structure of our lives may feel like everything's going right. It may feel like everything's going wrong. But it's the narrative structure itself is a consequence of mind, a consequence of language. And so by contemplating mind as mind, you're becoming aware of the movements of mind, the movements of thought. Again, if there's a thought that's appearing and you're able to recognize the thought and see the thought, be present and aware of the thought, then you yourself are not the thought. The thought is another phenomenal coming and going. Right? You are that which is aware of the thought as it comes. You are that which is aware of the thought as it's present. You are that which is aware of the thought as it leaves. And that awareness is consistently occurring. That's the field of awareness, or the space of awareness. That's your being. That's your true being, that which is aware. So by contemplating mind as mind, we're able to see thoughts as thoughts and to recognize I am not my thoughts. In the very same way that we can be present with feelings as feelings and recognize I am that which is aware of feelings. I am not my feelings. In the same way we can say, look, there's a body. I'm aware of this body. I'm aware of these sensations and these movements of body. I am that which is aware of body. I am not this body. You can start to see how mindfulness isn't necessarily so much about, making our day a little bit lighter. That's how it's taught in most traditions or sort of in a psychological context today, but it has a much deeper potentiality. It can help us connect with who we truly are and recognize the coming and going of all phenomena. And so that's the fourth category. The fourth foundation of mindfulness is to contemplate phenomena as phenomena. Now, of course, this actually has some very specific language around it in Buddhist tradition, but I'm not going to really lean into that too much. I'm going to talk about it in terms of all the thoughts, the feelings, the sensations, the emotions, the experiences, the people, the places, the things, the ideas, the beliefs, the notions, the models, all of that. All of that, it's all the realm of name and form. All of it is the realm of phenomena, that which comes and goes. Everything without exception is coming and going within the space of you, within the truth of who and what you are, as this open, aware presence that's aware of body, that's aware of feelings, that's aware of mind, that's aware of phenomena. You are this space within which all things come and go. And by practicing, by being present, by willingly connecting with ourselves as this aware presence, we can begin to disentangle ourselves from our identity with the body, our identity with our feelings, our identity with our mind or our thoughts, and our identity with the coming and going of phenomena. You're just a wide open space. And you can allow for all of it to come and go as it will. And mindfulness doesn't require that we be on a cushion or that we have any predisposed conditions met. You can be mindful anywhere at any time. That's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of it. And you can combine mindfulness with a lot of the meditative practices and techniques that I'm going to talk about. Now, before I go further and start talking about some of the other meditative techniques, I just want to open up the conversation for anyone that has any questions or comments about this mindfulness, about the practice of mindfulness and its pragmatic and practical application in our lives. So I'll give it a moment or two if anybody wants to chime in. Okay. All right then. Well, let's shift a little bit to something that's referred to as insight meditation. So this is the first of the meditative techniques that I want to cover. And insight meditation, again, it comes out of the Buddhist tradition. It's the Vipassana meditative tradition. And it's really sort of an awareness-based meditation. Now, depending on which Buddhist tradition you're aligned with, or if you go speak with a Buddhist practitioner, and depending on their particular Buddhist tradition, they might offer different meditative techniques. For instance, Zen has its own particular practices. Dog Zen has its own particular practices. And Theravada, which is the tradition that insight meditation comes out of, has its own processes and practices. And according to each one of these traditions, they will talk about this is the meditation that the Buddha himself practiced. And of course, that's a claim made by pretty much all of the different traditions. So whether or not insight meditation is something the Buddha himself practiced or not, I really couldn't tell you that. Everything that I've read indicates that it is. But I'm sure he practiced a lot of different things, because these are all tools. And you don't arrive at this understanding by grabbing only one tool and clinging to that tool. In fact, as you go through this process of examining these tools and techniques, what you'll find is that your relationship with them begins to shift and change over time. And that some techniques that perhaps were useful in one way at one point in time are no longer as useful and have to be set aside. And we have to evolve our ability to be present through new means, through new techniques, through new methods. I often say that every technique has sort of a self-destruction mechanic built into it, because if it becomes something that we start to lean on as if it were a crutch, eventually the universe or God or consciousness or being is going to kick that crutch out from under us, because ultimately this is about total freedom, right? Without the dependency upon any one particular thing. To recognize yourself as all there, as the essence, as the undercurrent of all that is, that your awareness of yourself and my awareness of myself are the same awareness. They're the same awareness. There's no distinction. As it plays out over here versus as it plays out over there, it's the same awareness that's fundamental. to both experiences. So insight meditation is a more direct form of meditation. It is something you pretty much do on a cushion. And it's one of these meditations where, posture is emphasized, as it is in a lot of formal meditation traditions. And you can also do it just sitting in a chair. It's not something that you necessarily have to do on a cushion. Matter of fact, when I took some Vipassana training many, many years, probably 2004, I think it was, I went and did a 6-week course in mindfulness and meditation practice. And half the room was people sitting on cushions, and the other half of the room was people sitting in chairs. I would also say you can lay down for this, but don't tell those instructors that I said that. So I'm going to assume that most of you are sitting in a chair. So in order to practice this form of meditation, get yourself into a comfortable, upright, seated position with your feet out in front of you, firmly planted on the floor. If you're sitting in a cushion, then you can cross your legs in Indian style, as you wish. We want to sit up straight. We want to make the spine tall. We want to make the spine straight. One of the things that you can do to help is you can imagine that at the very top of your head, right here at the very crown, you could say, as if there's a string coming out of the crown of your head, and as you pull on that string, your whole body's aligned. Your neck is relatively straight, perhaps leaning, or your head is down just a little bit, because again, if you focus on the crown as being the top, you'll notice there's a slight bend to the head, to the neck. You can have your hands in your lap, or you can have your hands to your sides. And close your eyes. And just bring your attention to the breath. And we're breathing in through the nose, and we're breathing out through the nose. And we're bringing our attention, our awareness, to the movement of air at the tip of the nose, at the tip of the nostrils, at the tip of the nasal passages themselves. Really feeling the sensation of air as it moves in, and the sensation of air as it moves out. Just noticing. Now, for most of us, if we haven't been doing this kind of practice for long, or if this is our first time, chances are the mind is just, going to go wild. And you'll notice that the mind is just, again, the mind has a certain gravitational force to it. So if we're in this meditative process, if we're paying attention to the breath, and we notice, oh my goodness, I've drifted off to thinking, don't get caught up in the thinking, just label it thinking and come back to the breath. You don't need to concern yourself with what you were thinking about, and you certainly don't need to start thinking about how you're not doing it right. Just label the experience of thinking as thinking and bring your attention back to the breath. We're kindly and gently tending to the breath. The process of meditation is not another way to be at war with yourself or in conflict with yourself or to judge or abuse yourself. It's a very tender, very loving, very gentle process of being present with yourself. It's like, in the process of trying to train and discipline our own minds to be more concentrated through these kinds of methods, we want to treat it as if we're potty training a brand new puppy dog the cutest puppy dog you've ever seen and you've given your whole heart to. And as you're potty training the little brand new puppy dog, it used to be that we would put out papers or pads or something along those lines, and we would, have the puppy there in the space, go puppy there, just be there and go. And the puppy would get up and wander off the papers, right? And so you would go and you would gently pick the puppy up and bring the puppy back again. Place the puppy in the center of the papers or in the center of the pads. And you would do that over and over again as often as you needed to, and you would be gentle and loving and kind because this puppy has your whole heart. Well, here you are. Give yourself your whole heart. Treat yourself with that gentleness, with that tenderness, with that lovingness, with that kindness as you go through this process of meditation. Just gently and lovingly returning your attention back to the breath. Another aspect or an important point within Vipassana meditation or insight meditation is awareness of physical sensations in the body. So for instance, if we're sitting on a cushion or sitting in a chair and we begin to notice I have an itch or I have a pain. Often our first, without even thinking about it, just completely unconsciously, our first response is, oh, I have to fix that. I need to scratch that itch, or I need to shift or adjust in order to dampen or dismiss or that pain. Within this particular meditation style, we are invited to actually be present with those sensations for as long as we can be. If there's a sense of pain, to be present with that sense of pain in the body. If there's a sense of discomfort, such as an itch or something along those lines, to be present with it. Not to the point where you begin to notice that one of your legs is falling asleep because it doesn't have proper circulation. And so you just continue to sit there and say, I'm going to let my leg fall asleep. No, we have to bring some wisdom to this. But we're being invited to, again, be present with the feeling states of the body, either pleasant or unpleasant. From the ground of our being, from that state of equilibrium or equanimity, where we allow for it all. So here I am, I'm able to be present with this pain or with this itch or whatever it might be. Another thing that we might do, it used to be where I would teach at a Zen center or at a retreat center. And, it would be on a busy road, and here everyone is meditating, and then a truck rolls by, right? And half the people in the room will start to think in terms of, wow, this place should really be in the woods somewhere because this noise is very disruptive to my meditation. And within this particular meditative practice, that's not true. What's true is that you have been offered the opportunity to be present with changes in the setting, in the setting of your experience, in the causes and conditions that surround you. When a noise is happening, right? Whether it's the air conditioning turning off and on, or a car honking outside your window, or we have a little dog that's running around the house right now who's very jingly, When we have those kinds of sensory experiences, sounds, we are invited to allow those sounds to occur within the spaciousness of our being. They're not disruptive. They're actually teaching us an openness, a willingness, a patience. And being aware of the fact that, if a sound arises and then a feeling arises in response, an unpleasant, I don't like that sound. Now there's an unpleasant feeling. I don't like that sound. It feels disruptive. I have an unpleasant feeling because I don't like the disruptive sound. Look at all the wonderful meat that we have been presented with to imbibe in our experience, to draw into our experience, and to teach us how to be fully present with all of our experience, pleasant and unpleasant. There's a theme developing here I hope you are catching on, because it's so essential. This is not about happiness. It isn't about a steady state of perfect joy. Those things come later on down the road as we have begun to relax all of the various tendencies of the body, mind, organism that takes itself so seriously. So this breathing in, breathing out through the nose. If we have difficulty with that, you can also try breathing in and breathing out from the space of the belly. The rising and the falling sensation of the belly as we breathe in and breathe out. For some people, that's a little bit easier to work with. We're just being aware. Aware of the breath, aware of the body, aware of our being. So again, that's a very sort of brief introduction. There's a lot more that I could say. This isn't a class on Vipassana or insight meditation, but it's an opportunity to get exposed to this particular meditative practice that's been used for thousands of years. So from here, I'm going to switch over to the heart breath, which for me, again, because my initial meditation training really was in Vipassana, in mindfulness and Vipassana, or insight. Then I took like a 10-year break. So I had a year where I was studying a lot of different practices. And then I had a 10-year break. I just, none of that stuff helped me as much as I thought it would, or as much as I wanted it to. And I just sort of set it all aside for 10 years. But then as a part of this experience of awakening that took place in 2014, one of the things I noticed is about a month prior to the actual awakening experience, the initial awakening experience where everything just sort of fell away, all of the teaching and training that I had received in mindfulness and insight all sort of came to me, again, naturally and effortlessly. I wasn't thinking about it. I wasn't reflecting on it. It just sort of started to happen. And one of the things that I would notice when I was breathing through the nose, or I was breathing into the belly, is that the process of the breath felt incomplete when concentrated in that way. Because if we're looking more deeply at the nature of the breath, we're actually looking at the nature of life itself. We're looking at the complex interplay of life. We're looking at interbeing, right? So, here it is, you're breathing in oxygen, you're breathing in this air. And where does that come from, right? It comes from the trees, the plants that draw in everything we put out. And then they put out what we draw in. And then when we're breathing in from right here. This is the world right here. I'm breathing in. This is the space that I'm breathing in right here. I'm breathing that in. Yes, I can concentrate on it at the position of the nose, at the tip of the nose. I can be with the physical sensations. I can feel it in the belly. But from here, from the tip of the nose to the depths of the belly, the breath is passing through the body. So I'm drawing the world in, I'm drawing life in. And life is filling me up. And then as I exhale, I'm dying into life. It's like each new breath is another lifetime, all in and of itself. The breath is the most sacred thing that we have available to us. It's so essential. We don't last long without it. But it's more complex and interwoven and interconnected and more simple than something like Vipassana might sort of acknowledge it at the outset. So what I began to notice is the sense that the breath was always moving through the space of the heart. As it went in, as it went out, it was always, the breath was centering, and breath was drawing me into the space of the heart. And so I started to find myself, not consciously, it wasn't something like I just told myself, I'm going to start breathing into my heart. It just sort of naturally and effortlessly evolved to this grounded and centered state of breathing and being completely centered in the heart. Every breath nourishes the space of the heart. And one of the ways that we can practice with this is the same way that we entered into Vipassana. You notice the breath, the tip of the nose. Is it a long breath, a short breath, a cold breath, a warm breath, a deep breath, a shallow breath? What's the quality of the breath? How does it feel in the belly? Is there rising of the belly, falling of the belly? Is it a half belly? Is it a full belly? Just be really present. We can feel the breath in the lungs as they contract and as they expand. And then we can begin to start to shift our attention right here into the space of the heart, right here into the center of our being. And what I used to tell people is, if you have trouble, if you're like sitting here saying, I don't know how to breathe into my heart, I'm not sure how I can do that, how to bring my attention to that. One of the things that you can do is you can place your hand over your heart, and you can practice breathing into your hand. So what I mean is your hand is placed over the heart, and it's just that place where you're able to breathe through the heart into your hand. I'm not saying through the arm into your hand. I'm saying, you're using this as a way to say, my heart is here. This is where I'm breathing. So it helps to concentrate the breath right here. And this is where I live. Pretty much anybody that you encounter who lives in this understanding, this is where they live. We all have different ways of describing it. And it may shift and change and have its own sort of quality in different ways, right? But for most of us, this is where we live. We're just right here, grounded in center in the heart of our being. And there can be a tremendous sort of opening that occurs as a result of breathing into the heart and being really present from the heart center, from the heart space, from the heart mind. When I'm talking about this practice of the heart breath, I'm often talking about dropping down from the mind, or dropping the mind down into the heart. And the more we begin to spend time in our heart center, the more we begin to open ourselves up to a natural wisdom that is not our own. The wisdom does not belong to me, Bradley. This is ageless wisdom that emerges from the source of our being. And it has a quality of intelligence that is insurpassable. And when we've learned how to be fully present with all of the things that we like and don't like, all of the pleasant and unpleasant, when we've come to that place of equilibrium and we're inhabiting it or embodying it from the position of the heart, then we are able to allow all of life to be what life is without trying to push it away or trying to cling to it. We can just allow and allow and allow and allow and allow for everything. for everything, for this moment to be exactly as this moment is, without needing to fix or change or correct it in it. So that's the heart breath. And before I go into the next couple of options, again, I want to give another opportunity here. If anybody has anything they'd like to any questions or anything like they'd like to ask or share about this particular technique, or either the insight meditation or heart breath. Okay. Then I'll go into the last couple of meditations that I really wanted to talk about. Well, let me take one step here. I'll just talk very briefly about metta meditation. So for some of us, it's sort of very difficult to occupy the heart. You know, for a lot of us, we still have a lot of psychological trauma, a lot of unworthiness, a lot of guilt and shame. We're still really very deeply entangled with thoughts and feelings, and that's all perfectly fine. And I don't want to. Last week in our session, I talked quite a bit about loving ourselves, trusting ourselves, and honoring our own journey. And I would suggest going back and viewing that video if you have questions about contending with some of those things. But metta meditation might be a useful tool if you don't feel like you're able to connect with your own heart, or able to connect with a sort of sense of kindness and compassion. So one example of metta, which is really, metta is a loving kindness meditation. One example, we could take a couple of moments and do something like the Vipassana technique, where we just do some breaths just to get centered and connected. And then we might shift our attention towards loving kindness. And I think this is out of the book, A Path with Heart, written by Jack Kornfield. I think that's where this particular language comes from. But we can start by saying, may all beings experience love and kindness. May all beings be well. May all beings be happy. Something like that. And as we're saying, you know, may all beings experience loving kindness. Perhaps we can summon forth the feeling sense of what that loving kindness might feel like, and really embody that sense. I'm really embodying the sense, the inviting loving and kindness on the parts of every being out there in the world, every being, everyone. Loving kindness. I'm extending it to you out of my own heart, the sense of loving kindness. So summoning the sensation, the quality of it. May all beings be well, right? Physically well, emotionally well, psychologically well. Yeah. And summoning forth, what is that for you? What does it feel like when you're well, when you're feeling well, and wishing that for all other beings? Happiness, what does that feel like, and wishing that for all beings? Again, going through the language, but also bringing and connecting the feeling sensation of it, the tonal quality of it, to the language that you're using. And you're doing it in a very large, a worldly sense, at least in the first round or two. And then maybe you tighten your circle a little bit. Rather than wishing love and kindness for all beings, maybe love and kindness for your family, or your community, or your friends, right? People that you know, people that you're connected with in some way. So maybe you do a round or two where you're wishing all of that well-being to those people in your life, and those people who occupy your circles of life. And then we enter into the harder stage, right? Where we then begin to summon images of people that we don't like, or that we have great difficulty with, or that we're struggling to forgive. Yeah? And we begin to offer the same. May this person who has caused me great pain experience loving kindness. May they be well. May they be happy. And again, summoning that within yourself and connecting with that sense of it on their behalf, for them, really wishing that for them. And this is a very powerful technique. If you have some struggles, some issues, some traumas, some forgiveness work that needs to be done, this can be a very useful tool working in that direction. So lots of different resources out there for metta meditations, M-E-T-T-A, metta, or loving kindness meditation. So that can be a helpful one as part of that heart breath, or as part of that process of really sort of opening our hearts. So the last two that I want to talk about, one of them is, there are a number of different contemplative methods. And when I'm using the term contemplative, what I mean is we're using the mind. We're using the systems and structures of language and thought in order to examine the systems and structures of thought and language. All right? So it's very paradoxical in many ways to say that on one hand, you don't really need to do anything because you are this aware space. You are that which is aware of the coming and going of all things. And that's your true nature. That's your true being. And yet here we are, we're in our experience of life. We're in the coming and going. The coming and going is where life is lived. And so, you know, there is something that needs to be done. Both are true. It's not a paradox when we're no longer in fixed positional thinking, where it's either one or the other, but rather there's room within this flexible understanding, this the sort of the acceptance of the mystery, where both can be fully present and both are allowed to be true at the same time, without there being one is true at the expense of the other, or one is more true than the other, or one is untrue. Just being able to say, no, it's all the same fluidity of being. It's all life. This awareness and everything that emerges out of this awareness is none other than this awareness. So contemplative methods are really meant for us to do sort of deep inner work on the constructs and functions of mind. When I was talking earlier about forgiveness, for instance, right? In order to forgive, you're very likely going to have to enter into the narrative, the self-narration of an event that occurred where you were wronged or harmed or injured by someone. And as you do so, you're bringing your attention, you're bringing your awareness to the exploration of that narrative history. And if you're doing it in a conscious, contemplative manner, you're doing it in an objective way, right? Without necessarily all of the emotionality, although emotionality can become part of it. And we're going to talk a little bit about that more next week when we talk about facing and letting go of our pain. A lot of stuff we're going to talk about next week is going to fall into this contemplative camp. But we might sit here and we might start to analyze the story a little bit. So this person did this terrible thing to me, right? And that's our starting point. We're having a difficult time with forgiveness, for instance. This is an easy one because we all have somebody or something like that in our past somewhere. You just find it for you and use it as a way to examine this a little bit. As you explore that narrative, you say, this person did this terrible thing to me. Oh, they're such a terrible person, right? Well, is that really true? Or was that person actually expressing their own unconscious orientation? If you were victimized by a person, were they victimized at some point in their history? Perhaps when they were a young child in the same state that you were victimized, or perhaps, even later on in life. Can you open yourself up to the possibility of changing the narrative to bring a compassionate stance to your investigation of the hurt or the harm or the injury that was perpetrated against you? Can you see that person through compassionate eyes, through objective compassionate eyes, and begin to explore it? What was it that occurred for this person that put them in this place where they did this thing to me? And then also, what's my relationship with the thing that they did to me? And then how has this thing that they did to me, how is that playing out in my life? How is that creating the various modes and expressions of thought and behavior. So we're bringing the mind online in order to investigate these things from the position of mind. And it can be something heavy like a past trauma, or it can be something so simple as saying, you know, here's this thought that keeps, you know, I've been going through my life the last few days and I'm seeing this particular thought come up over and over and over again. And for some reason, this thought needs my attention. So I'm going to go and lay down. I'm going to turn on some light music. I'm going to relax, do some breathing exercises. And then as I feel myself settling a little bit into my body and I can feel myself opening up a little bit, then I'm going to start to investigate with my mind. I'm going to start to inquire into the nature of this thought. What was this thought about? Oh, you know, let's use a common one, right? So I'm not going to have enough money next year in order to meet all my needs, right? So you can sit here and you can contemplate that. If it's been bothering you for a few days, you can bring that into this contemplative experience and you can begin to examine the narration around it. Is that really true? I mean, you know, that's a year away. Do you really know that's true? How many things can change between now and next year? Maybe it is true. Even if it is true, does it really matter? Because it's not happening right now. And if you wear the weight of something that's not happening right now, are you able to live life freely? Right? So we engage the mind in challenging our narratives, challenging our stories, questioning whether they're true or untrue, asking ourselves what they're founded upon. What's the structure of the story? Can you take the structure of the story apart in some way? Can you begin to isolate its constituent components and examine each one in turn? There's a wonderful, the work by Byron Katie offers a very powerful tool by just, you know, asking, is it true? Is it really true? What's your evidence that it's true? And then turning it around, right? So there are many techniques that we can use from a contemplative perspective. Another example would be contemplative prayer, right? Which isn't so much the kind of prayer that people are used to, right? Where we sit on our hands and knees and we ask God for something, or we beg God for something, or we make a demand of God. Contemplative prayer is much more about being open to what God has to say to us, right? To deep listening, and really listening to silence, because that's, you know, that's how God is fully expressed, in the silence and the stillness and the quiet of our being. That's where we find consciousness, being, presence, God, all that language, whatever those pointers are, that's where we find it, in the silence, the stillness, and the quiet of our own being. There's a reason there's a phrase, be still and know that I am God, right? Be still and know that God is present always in you, as you. That everything without exception is this is what we are. That's the truth of things. Yet the mind, as it's been conditioned and shaped, doesn't necessarily see life through that lens. It sees life through its conditioned views. So this contemplative practice is about challenging some of those things, whether it's through prayer and listening, or whether it's through inner examination. Again, we will talk a lot more about that next week in our session on facing and letting go of our pain. And the last technique that I want to talk about here, in the grounds of meditation anyway, is self-inquiry. Self-inquiry. Sort of the father of the self-inquiry movement is the Sri Ramana Maharshi, who is an adherent of Advaita Vedanta in the Hindu tradition. And you know, his basic teaching was very simple. People would come to him and they would ask him questions, and he would say, "You are that." You know, meaning you're that which is beyond explanation, and you're always that, and you're never not that. That's what I spend my time telling people. That's what he spent his time telling people. And most people weren't able to hear what he was saying. That's my experience as well. So he would then start to go down sort of a ladder of different approaches. And the first thing, if you didn't understand that you are this, or that, but that all of it is essentially of the sameness, the isness of life. If you aren't able to connect with that directly in your own experience, then the next thing that he would bring to bear is this method of self-inquiry. And he would go to other levels of meditation and other levels of spiritual practice beneath this. But the purpose of this particular technique is to just sit quietly and inquire, using the question, who am I? Who am I? I will say that my awakening experience came about as a result of this question alone. At the time, I was not familiar with Sri Ramana Maharshi or Advaita Vedanta or any of these spiritual practices. I had studied Buddhism for a year and had some insight meditation and mindfulness training. That was to the extent of it. But as a result of essentially an existential crisis, in late 2014, I started to ask this question, who am I? I was examining all the different masks that I wear, right? As many of us do. We wear these masks in order to protect and defend ourselves, and that's what I was inquiring into. Who am I behind this mask? And the question, who am I, created a rather profound shift in attention, a rather profound shift in consciousness. And I'll give you a little bit of insight into this method. It is something you have to really practice on your own and be present with on your own. But as you sit here and you ask the question, who am I? You'll begin to notice the mind has a tendency to answer and to respond to this question, who am I? And you might say, oh, I am this name. I am this job. I am this political affiliation. I am this, whatever it is, education level. I am, right? All the different qualities of our life that we tend to identify with. Those are the things that will often come up in response to the question, who am I? And this practice, the real emphasis on this practice is, again, as with all these other practices, to be able to hone in on the fact, to become aware in your own direct experience of yourself, that when you ask the question, who am I? The question is like a cloud in the sky. It's like an echo in a canyon. The question, who am I, is mind expressing language. Who am I? As a question, a format of language that we use in order to inquire, to gain information, to gain insight, to gain knowledge. We would ask a question. So who am I is an appearance of language within the presence and the awareness of our being. And every answer that comes is based on language and symbolism and narration and models and beliefs and ideas. I'm this, I'm this, I'm this, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this. Whatever it is that comes in response to the question is also of the mind. And you are that which is aware of the question, you are that which is aware of the answer, and you are not the question, and you are not the answer, because you are that which is aware of the question and the answer. And when you really begin to practice this and really begin to notice that this is absolutely fundamentally true, then everything that you think you ever knew about life fades into the background, becomes transparent. Because it's all supposition. This is when I was talking about in the very first session about tilting in the direction of awakening, and I was talking about this great mystery. Even as I sit here and I say this great mystery, that's language, those are words. Those words are appearing in the awareness that I am, the awareness that you are, the awareness that's the ever-present reality of life. the fundamental mystery that no words can point to, no words can define, no words can contain, no words can capture. It's ineffable. Why is it ineffable? Because if you say to yourself, oh, it's awareness, the words, it's awareness, are appearing in the awareness that you are. You might as well say, it's Pete. You might as well say, it's dog. You might as well say, it's fan. It doesn't really matter, because if you're aware of the presence of these words and these systems and this language and these beliefs and these models, you are that which is aware of them. So the question, who am I, isn't necessarily a question that we're meant to answer. In fact, I would say, if you have an answer to the question, who am I, look again. Keep looking until you realize that you are the looking itself. You are, what you're looking for is what you are and have always been, have never not been, and can never cease to be. So this question, who am I, this method of self-inquiry, is very, very much about just, again, getting really present and aware and connected and open and spacious. All of these techniques, all of these tools have had that same theme. And for good reason. I want to allow a couple of minutes here. I do, if we have some time, I want to talk a little bit about psychedelics. But I'd like to see at this point, again, now we've talked a little bit about contemplative methods and the process of self-inquiry. Does anyone have any questions on those topics? And of course, if you do, you can always schedule some time with me privately. Everybody on everybody on Zoom anyway has all the contact information. And if you're watching this through Facebook, or you've discovered this video after it was recorded, I would invite you to check out the website at awakeningintolife.com. Go to the events page, look up Campaign of Consciousness, and find the information necessary to contact me, and I will send you via email all the information that you need to schedule private appointments. They're all free. Everything's free as part of this series. So if you do have questions about some of this, please don't hesitate to just reach out and connect with me. I'd be happy to answer your questions or walk through things with you. So with that said, I'll hop into psychedelics for just a moment. And this is appropriate for meditation, a conversation about meditation. Because really, a lot of what we're talking about is about altering the default mode network of the brain. In other words, the brain has been conditioned along certain parameters, and every time that we interact with ourselves, or every time we interact with life, we're doing so from a playbook. And, so we often have the same kinds of responses to the same kinds of issues. This is why we find ourselves repeating the same patterns over and over again. And these methods, these mechanics of mindfulness and meditation, and even psychedelics, they help us sort of shred the playbook. They actually shift us away from the default mode network, and they open up tremendous new possibilities. And you can actually research the neuroscience on this. This is a well-researched, well-documented neuroscientific fact. The default mode network in the brain, and the fact that these methods, including psychedelics, help break those patterns. They open up new possibilities. They alter the neural pathways. They free us from old conditioned patterns of thought and behavior and open us up to new possibilities. All these techniques do that. So when we engage with a psychedelic, and first of all, let me just say, many psychedelics are illegal in the United States, and you should always be aware of the laws and the rules that apply within the country and the state and the local environment that you're in. I am not condoning the illicit or illegal use of drugs. But I am saying that cannabis is a naturally occurring plant that has certain psychedelic properties, or can, a lower sort of version of that. It was used for thousands of years by many indigenous tribes and other sort of similar tribal and shamanistic environments in order to connect with the spirit realm, right? And I would just say that it allows us, it opens us up to new possibilities in a lighter manner. Ayahuasca is essentially, and I might not be getting this entirely right, but it's based on a root. And this ayahuasca has the potential to open us up. And in the United States, ayahuasca is legal. Cannabis is legal in some states, and it's legal if you become a medical marijuana patient in other states. So you can actually get cannabis legally. Ayahuasca is legal in some locations if it's being used for a religious ceremony. So here in Orlando, where I live, there is actually an ayahuasca retreat center, and it's all very legal. It's not inexpensive, but it's very legal. And you can go and you can devote yourself to a weekend of ayahuasca experiences. And the other one that I would suggest, investigating or researching might be the use of psilocybin mushrooms. So again, a naturally occurring plant, something that grows from the ground, that can be ingested into the human body, that has been used for thousands of years as a way of addressing significant psychological issues, or as a way of connecting with ourselves more deeply in a spiritual sense. There's actually a tremendous amount of research within the field of psychology and the field of neuroscience around the impact that psychedelics like mushrooms can have on the system, how they can be used for the treatment of trauma, how they can help us in a number of ways with things like addiction, things like depression. Again, you can go and look at the research, the scientific journals on the exploration of psilocybin mushrooms and its impact. Its impact on people's well-being. There are others as well. I would generally tend, if someone was going to take an interest in psychedelic substances, I would strongly urge, again, do it, make sure that you're doing it in a legal context. But I would suggest or urge that you use naturally occurring substances that you can identify and you can verify their sort of authentic quality. Whereas if you start to look at things that come in a powdered form, or things that come in a liquid form, things like acid and MDA and some of these other things, some of these things were cooked up in laboratories. They could have a wide variety of different substances intermixed in them. And I really wouldn't suggest using those. I would very much say, things like cannabis, ayahuasca, mushrooms, and other naturally occurring psychedelic substances are probably safer and healthier. And our experience with these types of psychedelic substances should be done under the watchful eye or under the guidance of someone who is able to be present with us, able to help keep us safe. Somebody that can be there for us as we encounter some of the things that we might encounter in ourselves. I would also say that these substances, it's important to encounter them with a certain sort of intention. A lot of people will take these kinds of substances as if it's going to be a party. We're going to take some mushrooms and have a good time. And that's when you hear about people having a bad trip. These substances are not meant to go out and have a good time. They're not meant to go out and have a party. These types of substances are sacred invitations into our being, and they are likely to shake us to our core. At the ayahuasca retreat center, I went there a couple of years ago, And we did an ayahuasca ceremony on Friday night, and then we did another one on Saturday night. Well, after the one on Friday night, the next morning we did a processing group. And the first experience of so many people was, oh my God, I went through this ego death. Very common. Some people don't react or respond well to that as they're going through it. And some people are left shaken as a result of their experience. So it's important to be able to engage with people who have been through this process, who understand the impact and implications of these substances, so that you're not sort of left hanging or dangling and confused and lost as a result. Matter of fact, one of the things that, people who are trying to prevent the use of these substances or have a great difficulty with the use of these substances will say, well, it creates a psychotic break. Well, when you live in the enlightened or awakened state, one could say that life as it is commonly lived within society today is insane, not the person who has seen beyond it and says to themselves, I am interested in living a more deeply connected life, which is ultimately what a lot of these substances will elicit, ultimately, as long as they're accompanied with the right intention, the right guidance, and supported and nurtured. It's a beautiful thing. It's an absolutely beautiful thing. So if you have fears or concerns or issues with the potential use of these kinds of substances, I'm not saying that everyone has to or should. I'm just saying that they can be useful in the same way that meditative practices, mindfulness can be useful. These are all about seeing through the common frame of mind that we've been conditioned into. And for some people, these substances could be used as, we could say, as a shortcut. Do a tremendous amount of research and get the appropriate guidance, and combine the use of these substances with the use of mindfulness and meditation techniques. Don't just do them on your own with the expectation of, oh, it's medicine, it's going to heal everything. If all you do is go to a ceremony once every 6 months to get a fix, right? You're in that crutch mode. And we want to be able to leave behind the dependencies that we have on tools and techniques. We want to leave behind the dependency that we might have on the use of substances to get us to a certain state. And so this brings me to my last point that I want to make on this conversation about mindfulness and meditation. And that is, these tools, these techniques, and these methodologies are to demonstrate to yourself that the tools, the techniques, and the models, the tools, the methods, they're not necessary. You have to use them to arrive at that place within yourself where you understand why that's true in order for it to be true for you. But what you discover as a result of this journey is that you yourself, as you are right now, you are the meditation. You are life itself, breathing in and breathing out. You are life itself, thinking. You are life itself, imagining. You are life itself, bringing into conscious being the entire play of experience. You are always that. You are never not that. That is all there is. This is all there is. You are this. You are that. And the discovery, that's enlightenment, awakening, self-realization, is the discovery of that central fact through your own direct, immediate, and intimate experience. These tools, these techniques, and these methods help us come to a place where we go, oh, wow, interesting. This is always true. And it isn't more or less true when I'm in this state or that state. It isn't more or less true when I'm practicing this form of meditation or that form of meditation. What's true is always true. It is never not true. And that is what I am. That is what's here. So that's my last sort of comment on mindfulness and meditation. It's now 9:30. I've managed to talk through the entire process. I hope that there was at least enough of an opportunity to experiment with a few things. before we go, I just want to ask if anyone has any questions.
How does one go about finding a guide in Florida?
A guide in Florida. That's tricky business. As I said, there's a location here in Orlando that does ayahuasca ceremonies. I would suggest, whatever, if you're not in the Orlando area, perhaps there's some place in your location, in your area, where there is the opportunity to participate in a legal ayahuasca ceremony.
Yeah.
Again, I'm being very conscientious about the importance of the way our society is set up and the legalities that we have to sort of acknowledge. You may be able to connect with certain spiritual communities where people are more aware in your local area of some of these things being available. Who knows?
Sounds good.
I know that we have a local Ram Dass group that gets together, and psychedelics is a common conversation amongst that group.
Yes, I've been there. It's interesting. What about the compassionate use? Do you know anything about that? The FDA is supposed to by 2020 let up on that so you can have expanded access for psilocybin and MDMA.
I think that's fantastic. I don't really know anything about that at this point in time. I will take that information and make a note of it to do some additional research on where the laws and the rules are right now. But yes, I know for a fact that it's being used in a number of clinical trials in certain approved settings. I just wasn't aware of a particular date that's been added for compassion.
Yeah, it's been approved for expanded access already, but they just are getting their act together, I guess. So that'd be nice to know more about.
Yes, absolutely. There's I think it was Netflix. Maybe was it Netflix that we saw the MDMA? I don't remember either. And I don't remember what it was called, but I know that Lisa and I were with a friend of ours, and he was introducing us to, I think it was on Netflix, but I can't be sure. It was a documentary on the use of MDMA in order to heal trauma. And it was really well done by a pair of clinical psychologists. There were two of them. They would spend like 2 or 3 sessions with a person, preparing them for the experience, and then they would be present with the person throughout the whole experience multiple times, working through their traumas, and the person was completely changed as a result of MDMA being introduced in this very clinical, very carefully laid out, very well structured process, night and day. And these were real, these were people who had gone through wartime traumas, terrorist attacks.
Trips, it was probably, is it Trips of Compassion, that movie?
Was
Israel, and were there some people from Israel? Yeah, there's Trips of Compassion. Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. So things like that, those can be very eye-opening.
It was.
Yeah. And I know that, for me, I'm working on my master's now, and that'll be done within the next year or so. And then I'm going into a PhD program with the California Institute of Integral Studies.
Oh, yeah.
And alongside my PhD work, they have a 1-year program. I don't know if they have it every year, but they had a 1-year program on psychedelics, using psychedelics in a clinical setting. So I'm still looking forward to taking or being part of that program at some point in the future. But it's again, the research that is coming out of these clinical trials is very compelling. And I would say that my own experiences over the last few years have been very compelling as well. And I can't say enough about the way that these substances can actually help break us down and help shift us into greater degrees of conscious being, of awareness, of just being sort of more relaxed in our experience of ourselves, because we're not taking things quite so seriously anymore. We've seen through the veil. So these things are very powerful.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any other questions? Comments? All right. Well, again, for those of you who are here tonight, I really, really appreciate you joining and taking the time out of your busy day to come and sit with myself and Lisa, who's been sitting over here quietly, relaxing and enjoying her evening. We really appreciate you taking the time. If you're watching this, on a video recording, please come join us for the next one. My understanding is that the Facebook feed didn't work so well tonight. That's all right. I'll be taking the recording from the Zoom session and editing it and getting it out on the website so people can watch. But I would invite you to come and join our next session, because next week, next Sunday night, from 8 o'clock to 9:30 Eastern Time, we're going to be talking about facing and letting go of our pain, which is, really looking at the conditioning, our history, the things that we're holding on to, the things that we haven't really worked on within ourselves, bringing some of these tools to bear, some of the contemplative exercises, some of the forgiveness qualities, some of the metta techniques. We're going to be really talking about how to embrace all of the great difficulties that have shaped you over the course of your life, so that you can sort of start to relinquish them. So I would encourage people to come and join us for that particular conversation. And I would also encourage people, whether you've already scheduled a session with me or not, or you'd just like to sit down and talk about some of these things, please feel free. I think in one of my emails I said that if you're taking part of this series and you have my contact information and I have your contact information, feel free to schedule additional sessions. So if you have questions about tonight, or if you have questions after the next session, or questions at any point within the next 4 weeks I think we have left, please feel free to go to the website and just schedule some one-on-one time with me. I don't want anybody to feel like they've been cast out into the world with a tidbit of information that has then actually created some problems for them. Because if we're trying to address these things on our own, they can open us up to confusion, and we can get anxious and concerned about things. And if we just sit down and we talk through them, we can diffuse some of that. Again, please come join us for the next session. Schedule some private one-on-one time if you like. And other than that, just thank you again, everyone, for being here. It's always such a pleasure, such a beautiful opportunity to just come and share. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Take care and have a lovely week. We'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.